Thank you for joining me for another segment of Off the Plantation, the journey towards freedom. I'm Dr. Mack. And the reason why we're here is because we actually have a vibrant YouTube channel called Off the Plantation. I'm going to encourage you to stick with this through to the end because this information is being provided. You won't find anywhere else, quite honestly. The reason why I can say that with all confidence is because I just wrote a book. It's called Revealed: The Archetypes of American Politics. And so what we'll be talking about today are the one of the primary archetypes, which is the archetype or the pathology, if you will, of the overlord. Now, where do I get this from? Malcolm X actually did just a fabulous speech in 1963 called "The Message to the Grassroots," and in that speech, he provided really some metaphors, some analogies that overlay directly onto America. He basically made the metaphorical idea that the interpersonal communications that was happening on plantations, the antebellum South and the plantations where slavery was occurring in the 1800s, can actually be overlaid onto America generally. And basically, he said the way that people interacted and communicated, and the kind of dynamic that you would find on the plantation, which would have an overlord, the plantation owner and his wife, and then you would have your house Negro, which he characterized as those that would do all of the bidding of the overlord, keeping everybody on the plantation, doing all that they had to do to keep everybody on the plantation, whether it meant to shame them, guilt them, snitch on them. But their job was to make sure to help the overlord maintain the plantation, the order on the plantation. And then he said, then of course there were field Negroes, and those would be like Frederick Douglass, Harry Tubman, Sojourner Truth, and those who were actually enslaved and then had so much zeal that they actually escaped at some point. And so he said that that's the dynamic that you really have in America, and I have to agree. When I wrote this book, I didn't realize how close of a parallel we have in America, and especially in American politics, to what Malcolm X described in his message to the grassroots in 1963. But fundamentally, we do. We have overlords, which would be your globalist, Marxist, leftist, progressive types, who are really running, trying to get us as quickly as possible into this sort of great reset, this globalist collective type notion. Then you have the folks that are operating under the pathology of the house Negro, which would be like media, academia, even a great deal of pastors and religious institutions that are doing the bidding of the overlord. In other words, they're saying, "Oh no, it's okay. We can go globalist. It's fine." Or they're in some ways encouraging and supporting the overall goals of the overlord, um, because they're being compensated to do so. And that's a whole nother subject that we can cover at a different on a different video. And then you have the field Negroes, which, hey, like that would be like me. I fully operate under the pathology of the field Negro, in the sense that I don't want any totalitarian, authoritarian, any kind of policies, any kind of schemes that are trying to prevent me from being totally free. Freedom is something that is innately given to every human being. It's God and man, and God wants that direct relationship with us without any of these sort of artificial governmental type structures that are preventing our ability to exercise freedom in the truest sense. These are natural rights that are given to man, and everybody on the planet should want to exercise those full and natural rights without any kind of impediment or government or some kind of policy that sits in between. So that would be me. I would operate under the pathology of the field Negro. Now, this particular segment, I wanted to go in on the overlord, and especially going in on the overlord so you can get a real sense of what that is, but also get a sense of how it tried to play out in this past election. And now that we've come out of the election, we should see that there were some really aggressive forces that were at play in this election. Then this election, we saw that these forces really wanted to completely quiet, and dispel any notion that you should want to be a free thinker, or that you should want to be an independent voter. If you express those kinds of ideas, you were actually quickly, called, racist, misogynist, or Nazis, or fascists, or any number of pejoratives. And why? Well, the idea is that if people are able to fully exercise freedom, in the sense freedom of speech, in the sense of freedom of ideas, where we can exchange ideas, then we're no longer going to be good for being enslaved, so to speak, to a system. We're off the plantation. And so it was so aggressive in this past election because we had so many people that were being red pilled, waking up. They were like, I don't think, just because I think differently, or just because maybe these Republicans here and there, or these conservatives here and there, or these independent thinkers here and there think differently, that they're Nazis or fascists. This is kind of over the top rhetoric. Maybe I should start to look into this. And then guess what? They got red pilled, and they got red pilled, and then it became a groundswell, and it turned into a landslide for people that are, really independent, conservative or Republican thinkers. So, but I wanted you to understand, we should connect the dots to this paradigm that was actually happening on the plantation, because on the plantation, this was the exact tactic that was being used by the overlords. The overlords would prevent any of the slaves from reading, from being able to communicate with one another. When they had the field Negroes in the field, actually doing pulling the cotton, or doing whatever field work they were doing, it was important for them to have you know a lot of distance in between the field workers, so they couldn't sort of gather this sort of collective consciousness about, man, we're being really slighted here as human beings. We're being jacked up, enslaved by you know this one family. How's this? Um, but the way that you prevent people from being able to, sort of put the pieces together, connect the dots, is you create distance between them and others. The other thing that you do is you make sure that you keep them sort of dumb, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean, you keep them compliant and dumb, in the sense that you won't allow them to read, or learn how to read, or understand how to read. And the better you do that, the more dependent they are on you as an overlord, to continue to be enslaved. And so this was the sense of what happened on the plantation. They prevented them from reading. They did not teach them anything. They made sure that they had distance between them as they worked the fields, because they didn't want them to sort of come up with any ideas about breaking free, or collaborating and scheming and figuring out how to break free of the plantation. So this was how they kept it going, how they kept people enslaved for such a long period of time. And then we're not talking about one or two slaves on the plantation. We're talking a lot of people, and they could easily have overrun the plantation owner, the overlord. But the idea is that if you can enforce this, and most of them enforce this by way of the house Negroes, who really were the sort of the enforcers, to make sure that they carried out the wishes of the overlord. They're very obedient people, but they were easily manipulated and deceived with some kind of compensation. And so, of course, they took the compensation, and made sure that they snitched on anybody that they would hear would want to escape. And they made sure that they kept all of the slaves, field slaves, working in separated from one another, so they couldn't have this sort of collective consciousness for freedom. So this is how this worked. Now, in this past election, we saw it in spades, right? Anytime that we would want to have rallies, one place or another, we would hear, and especially in the Madison Square Garden, oh, if you go there, you're all Nazis. Why would we all be Nazis? I mean, we're just trying to go to a rally and yeah. Well, you're Nazis because you're associated with this person, and this person is a danger to the plantation. This is the underlying thoughts. And so the reason why they were doing that is because they cannot have so many people coming together collectively, then a corpus of knowledge and sort of collective intellectualism would start to arise, and would arise a sense of, hey, we all need to be free. We all need to embrace these ideas because these ideas can actually help propel America forward and keep us sovereign, and et cetera, et cetera. So we saw that in a big way in this past election. And so it's important that you understand, the less educated you are about your situation, the more susceptible you are to being enslaved or abused, if you will, or manipulated by the overlord, or by the government or the apparatus or the globalist entity or whatever it is. So it's important that we as Americans, we came through an election, and it was gratifying, I think, for most people. But it's important that we continue to educate ourselves, continue to sort of meet and encourage and help others, so we can all continue to grow down this trajectory toward freedom. Fundamentally, we want everybody to be free. Yeah, that shouldn't even be. There's nothing controversial about that. Freedom is innate. It's God given. It's natural rights. It's the things that every human being should want. So, in essence, this is a wonderful trajectory that we're on, and we should encourage it by making sure that we stay plugged in to our communities, making sure that we get educated, that we continue to read about policies, about cabinet appointments, about all these other things that have had such a profound effect in this past election. And then we can actually accelerate towards freedom. So if we want to get off the plantation and continue the journey towards freedom, the point is let's get educated, let's encourage one another, and let's make sure that we don't fall for being just fat, dumb, and ignorant about what's going on around us. That's the way that we remain enslaved. And I know we all want to be free. So let's be free. Let's encourage others to be free. And we encourage others to be free by just getting in there and reading and gravitating towards all the things that will help us to grow our communities. All right. So I hope this is helpful. This is how it played out in the last election and how it will continue to impact us. With overlords, they're a relentless bunch. So we have to kind of be conscious. We have to keep our eyes open, make sure that we see that what they're trying to do to us, and make sure that we reject them. Anyway, Dr. Mac signing off. Good to have you. And again, please share this, subscribe, and make sure that you get off the plantation, baby. All right, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. God bless.